a chance to tell you about this little girl out at the South Lansing School who, when my cousin, Wilma Martin, was working out there and asked me to come over and share with the girls, she talked about my work with Dr. King and the girls, at the South Lansing School. Some of you may not know, they're young, they're preteens and teenagers. But as I walked up to the podium after Wilma's introduction, I heard one little girl say, and y'all still living? So now I could make a whole speech just about that little girl's observation, are y'all still living? And I think I have done that even here. I thought that was maybe an easy, light question, but as I thought about it, it got to be a very serious question for me. And so I began to explore more deeply that question and asking myself, am I still living? And I think it was Dr. Edwin Burke who, the first line in one of his books is that I think he was 80 at the time that he wrote the book, said he started to ask himself, what is it to truly live? Well, that really is another speech, but it also applies to what I'd like to focus on in a way, what is it to really live? So anyway, I answered that little girl's question and hope that she got something from my sharing about it even that day. But I want to focus on a couple of little stories. Actually, they seem little, but are actually very big stories, for they help me focus on one way of looking at the major theme of this conference, We Make Our World. I'm not convinced we really acknowledge and accept this statement that we make our world. So let's check out some of the past parts of the journey through which we have come as a country, anyway, and as individuals, and do a little check-in about that. Do we acknowledge that question as something that applies to us? Do we really believe that we make our future? There are several anecdotes, 2 or 3, which could be fleshed out to show how they incorporate large parts of our historical experience. So I'm exploring these days whether we really consciously hold this as an operating principle of our lives. Do we really believe that we make our future? Do we really accept that we make it? This is important for and for me, for what we believe determines our future. What we believe determines our future. I've worked with that a good bit and looked at what are the things I say that I believe, and I have decided that what I believe does in fact relate to how I'm living my life and what I think of myself as contributing. When the woman called Mrs. Eubanks, Topsy Eubanks, and they call her Topsy, an over 50-year-old woman in my citizenship education workshop, when she realized that she made her future, and we didn't use that phrase then necessarily. I'm talking about the citizenship education program, which I'll say a little bit more about as we spend this little time together. But Ms. Eubanks said, when she was sitting in the workshop and we were struggling with our rights as citizens and changing the belief system from which we work, she said, the cobwebs commenced to moving from my brain. Now, I think Mrs. Eubanks probably went to, I think it was the 9th grade. I had some interesting conversations with her. But in the workshop, that was the, I think, very poetic way that she expressed what was happening with her. The cobwebs commenced to moving from my brain, she said. Now, this observation, for me, became a great metaphor that would force me to look at thoughts, practices, and beliefs by which I lived my life. Okay, the little stories. I said, I hope that what I share can be encapsulated in 2 or 3 little stories. First one. Once, cutting the limb off of a tree in my yard, I became aware of an overpowering to apologize to that tree. Incorporated in this story is the full saga of a major event in our life's journey, a sense of the connectedness of life, all life, in whatever form, and certainly this new consciousness extended to peoples the world over. You can imagine that there are not many places where I could share this experience, this feeling that cutting a limb off of a tree made me conscious of the connectedness of life. Now, do take note of the fact that I do make exceptions when it comes to flies and mosquitoes. But this sense of connection to the life force, life energy, prevails with me still to this day. I share it with you because I hope the same is true for you. Another event is encapsulated in this story. In early 1960, I took a small group of family members to lunch at a Washington, D.C. restaurant. In the group was my sister's father-in-law, and she called him Mr. Buck. 5 or 6 of us sat down. I quickly became aware that Mr. Buck was still standing, nervously clutching the back of his chair. He was sort of wiggling the chair, but he didn't sit down. And I realized what was going on with him quickly. I said to Mr. Buck, you can sit here now. That too won't make any sense to you unless you realize that there was a time when we couldn't have gone in that restaurant and he couldn't have sat there. I never forgot that I realized he needed some encouragement and assurance that it was okay to sit there. Okay, I'm thinking of, okay, the connection, being connected to all of life, and what happened, what transpired in this great movement, as I like to call it, that rearranged the social order in this country. You see, as I said, Mr. Buck, a poor black sharecropper, grew up in a time when black people were not allowed to sit to eat where white folks sat. The other experience was seeing a cartoon where a mother is yelling out to her son who was playing on the beach. The mother said in the cartoon, "Jimmy, I told you about playing on that beach. Get out of that water." A personal transformation occurred in me when I read that cartoon. You see, before I had never thought of environmental destruction as something that I needed to be concerned about. Destruction of this wonderful planet on which we are privileged to live, I thought, was somebody else's concern, somebody else's business. I felt no need to bother myself with such issues. But I became conscious of how very much I love to go to the beach. Not to get a tan, I already was born with my tan. But you're often taking the grandchildren, my grandnieces and nephews. But suddenly, I had to wonder, reading that cartoon, if the ship I read about that was caught dumping hospital waste in the ocean was anywhere near where we once played on the beach. This consciousness also has pervaded my thoughts, from recycling to the use of plastics in many ways. It applies for me. In summary, I know that I can share powerful transformative experiences that occurred for me as I realized the connectedness of the very life force flowing to and amongst all of us. I realized how changing the political, cultural system from American-style parties, so Mr. Buck, black people, could enter places licensed to serve the public, and not only be served, but to be welcomed and served with respect. It came clear to me that it's not just the other people who must be aware of taking care of this wonderful planet on which we are privileged to live, but that every single one of us is called upon to become conscious citizens, conscious of holding a vision of the future we want to create. What is it like? If we had more time, or if I were here for a full day, half day, if I could get us all into some kind of session and ask you to envision that you left the planet, but you come back 50 or 60 years later, and everything is so different, everything is so perfect. And I'd love to go with that idea and then invite everybody to work with this question. What did I do to make it so perfect? But we would have had to leave and then come back. They know we'll do that. I'll catch you somewhere else. You look and wonder, what did I do to make it so perfect? So the woman I saw dumped her bag of leftover food on the parking lot a few weeks ago in front of one of my favorite stores. She almost got a little lecture from me, but I realized the most effective way to reach her would be to infuse this consciousness into the culture, to come to a place where every institution in the country puts forth this awareness, promotes these important values. Envision education systems starting in kindergarten, religious communities, social activist organizations, and using powerful media of every kind to ensure the culture, to infuse the culture with the importance of helping create and sustain a viable future in which major challenges of today have been met, though work on many of them will be ongoing. In these little stories reside the message of what we have had to confront. Mr. Buck, whose story could be replicated in thousands of ways and situations, to the message of the mandate or consciousness that I too must be concerned about caring for this beautiful planet on which we're privileged to live. This Bioneers organization, this conference, provide a vehicle, a channel through which we can realize a new consciousness, changing, if necessary, the way we see our role. But I'm ahead of my story, perhaps. Yet right here, I'm tempted to go into how we ought to start a movement, insisting that every institution in the country adopt as a major focus of its work ways to permeate the culture with the truth that we make our future. Just imagine if every business, every corporation, every medical establishment, every social club and religious establishment and community had incorporated into its mission statement the truth that we make our future, with examples of how to do it, and especially the media, perhaps, an underused or wrongly used system or institution. Cutting the limb from the tree may be more sensitive to the gift of life itself. The mother in the cartoon ordering her son from the beach lest he is damaged by toxic water from dumping in the ocean. Mr. Buck, so programmed that he was not worthy of sitting to eat in a public establishment where white people would be eating, captures the painful culture of the time. At the same time, the changes wrought by the civil rights movement, which was a people's struggle